in Ilona though, but in a way that's a wonderful, it's a wonderful test for people like you and myself. It requires then you to put on your critical wine thinking cap.
Mm-hmm.
How do you approach that question? Because there's so much that could go into it. I got to admit, look, we have those colleagues or people we know in the business, let's say, that they would poo-poo that. You know, they just feel like they float in some world of, you know, wine royalty.
Oh, yeah.
For whatever reason. And actually, I think that's the coolest question to get, because you're helping somebody that is at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It is exciting.
And if you can't answer that question in a way that is helpful, then you shouldn't be in the business for so many reasons, whether you don't have the knowledge or ability, experience, or then the other side of it, or your ego is too big, or you think you're hot shit, or you know, for whatever reason. But you know, we're dealing with this, you know, we're lucky we're dealing in this world of this wonderful product. This wine should be shared, you know. Again, it's something that can be so human. And if you can't answer that easy question, an easy question like that, like recommend a white wine, well, then you engage, you start asking questions. Okay, well, what is your level of experience? You know, what kind of wines, if you have any experience, what do you like? And the other thing is, where are you located? You know, I get a lot of questions, for example, in America, you know, I would like to get, you know, do you know any, you know, good red wines around 15, 20 bucks? Okay, good question to start with. Then you say, well, first of all, like, what area are you in? Because the distribution model too, you know?
Absolutely.
And then I'm not saying I have an answer for every little locale, but then you can at least, if somebody says, well, yeah, you know, I live on 57th and Madison. Well, okay, if you that specific, I can direct you right to a corner wine shop that's great. But if somebody says, no, I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, it's like, well, I don't know, and I'm not sure what's there. But tell you what, depends on the kind of reds. If you're, you know, like something heavier, fuller body, maybe a little oaky, look for something from Australia, California. You know, if you feel you like rustic wines, or, you know, or Italy is a great way to go, or you know, you might be able to find some French wine in it. So this is actually like the best test for those of us that claim to be wine professionals, you know?
Yes, it resonates so much what you're saying, because once you start asking questions and learning, then that kind of informs your answers. The more symbiotic that kind of relationship is, the more productive and insightful the dialogue becomes.
Yeah.
I actually, at one point, made friends with this woman who was a scientist, and she loved wine. So she started thinking about helping distributors be more effective. And she started studying the geographies, the consumer behaviors in different states.
Oh.
And then she realized that when somebody's distributing wine and they have a certain brand that they're promoting, it's like they're promoting it nationwide without realizing who lives where. And what I mean by that is that you probably don't want to drink heavy cabs in Hawaii. It's probably more appropriate to more northern states that have longer, you know. She started studying climate patterns, and then the picture emerged that was very different, that's more learned and informed. Because yes, it's not just summer, winter seasonality, but it's also some states naturally lend themselves to certain buying habits, and they're going to consume more of that than this, right? And then all of a sudden you're more effective as a business if you understand not just what you're selling, but who you're selling to.
Exactly.
What that context is. Yeah. And it's the same with people asking, okay, I like red wine, but why? Why did you ask that? Why did you say red and not white? And where are you coming from? And then all of a sudden this conversation happens. That's utterly fascinating.
Yeah, it's almost, it's strange. My mother, we talked about my mom, she was a psychologist, and for a good part of her career, clinical psychologist. And so I think a lot about, in a way, it's almost like you're, I don't want to call it therapy, that's not right, but it's a consultation, you know?
It is.
There's an exchange, and you might even, somebody may come to you with some kind of question, but if you as a wine professional take it seriously and have the time and ability to engage, you might go somewhere else. They may say, well, I just really love red wines. And then by the end of it, based on a wonderful conversation and exploration, maybe you collectively learn that champagne is their thing, or whatever. It doesn't even have to stick with what maybe they think they're stuck to. I like that part of it. That's me. I like the getting to know, the engagement of it. And
so cool. It's such a cool concept. Like, your mom clearly led people to understanding them, themselves to a greater extent. I mean, at the end of the day, I really believe most of us have the answers, but getting to those answers, the work leading up to it is the hard work, and you need a mentor. And some psychologists are amazing at that.
Well, in the my mother, she's okay. We talked about my friend Armand. My friend Armand was even better, and he wasn't a psychologist per se. He was a psychotherapist. Mm-hmm. He was even more masterful at this, and I even learned between the two, having people like that in my life, just watching. It was this way of engaging with people, or at least understanding where somebody may be coming from, and understanding that where they may be coming from, they may not even be completely aware of where they're trying to go.
That's really cool.
Wine is that way. For those of us, like the two of us, we've experienced and explored, this wonderful, huge world of wine, and we have a much broader experience and knowledge base.
Yes.
And so, sure, somebody says, well, can you recommend a $15 red? You don't just go say, well, you could probably get a Barbaresco at a pretty good price.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask some questions, see where things are going, see where they're coming from, see where they are, who, and you never know. That conversation may lead to other things. They'll say, like, I never had a white wine I liked. It's like, well, what wines have you had? Like, well, to be frank, like, I'm not even sure, or something. There's a whole world, there's so much possibility. My uncle, I had an uncle, my mom's oldest brother, and he passed away just a few years ago. He was also enormously instructive when it came to this idea of being able to deal with, how to relate to people. He loved people, and he didn't graduate college. He was a smart guy, kind of kooky, kind of crazy. But when I was much younger as a kid, I remember spending some time with him, and I could tell how fascinated he would be just meeting people and speaking with them with no agenda, no nothing, not trying to get anything. But he said something to me which always resonated. And then especially my mom, I could see how my mom, how she was, and then my dearest friend Armand was somewhat similar. He said, everybody is an open book, and everybody has some story to tell. It may seem boring, it may seem on surface, but everybody has some story, because we're all human. We're all in this experience. That's what he was getting at, which is anyone you come across has some story, just by virtue of where they are, who they are. Well, they came from somewhere. They had some kind of parents. They have some kind of family. They've had ups and downs. They've had, so that stuck with me so much through my whole life, which is realizing everybody, all of us, we have some kind of story, behind where we are, who we become,
Oh my God. I'm almost getting emotional right now. A rare occurrence, when I'm, having this lovely conversations. You touched me so much, because when I was a little girl, I grew up in an urban area that had a lot of tall gray buildings, and I would look at the flickering lights at night, Yeah. And every single window, there was a story behind it.
Yeah.
There was a family.
Wow.
There was maybe a lonely soul. And what's interesting is that
Where was that? So where was that? Where did you grow up?
St. Petersburg.
St. Petersburg, Russia?
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Oh, wow. Yeah.
yeah, so
That's funny. We never talked about that. I didn't realize you grew up in St. Petersburg. I knew. Wow, that's cool.
yeah, so I have a different frame of reference, but
Yeah.
and like the gray buildings that were so inhospitable looking, they just look all homogeneous, and some of them more dilapidated than others. So there's a sadness on the outside, but I always looked at those bright lights and I thought about what is the story behind it.
Yeah.
And it carried me all the way to, my writing career, because I was in business before that and really never thought I would be a writer. So I came at it from a very different angle than the traditional classic journalism. I just discovered along the way that I'm a storyteller.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is exactly what you said. I see the stories, I hear the stories, I take it all in, and it's like I just help externalize it, I facilitate it. But at the end of the day, it's really about that person, their heart and soul, their mind, their attachments, their likes and dislikes that I find endlessly fascinating. I mean, if I had 1,000 lives, I would spend them all telling other people's stories.
Yeah.
I just think there's so much to what you just shared. And I think if we're all cognizant of that, when, we meet each other in whatever space we meet, that behind that person, behind that face, there's a whole world. And get to know it as opposed to try to judge it or elevate it or denigrate or whatever it is that you want. Don't impose yourself. Don't spring into action because you just feel the need to do something. Just like take a step back and get to know them.
And that's probably a challenge for many people. I can see for some people that's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to humanize some people.
It is.
I hate to put it that way, but and I'm saying this, unfortunately, what I mean is we, sort of the culture we live in here in America, not a class system at all, but there's almost like a quiet class system. And I think some people are uncomfortable if they get to know people around them as human beings. I hate to admit it, but I think I'm saying something that is extremely accurate. And for anybody that truly has empathy and compassion, I mean, you go through the drive-through at a fast food restaurant or whomever maybe is, if you're hiring people that are mowing your lawn or cleaning your house, and I'm saying this as somebody who does these things.
Yep.
And I've been around enough people that also do that where, you see where there seems to almost be a fight against acknowledging sometimes that these are human beings living, breathing, just like we are.
Right.
And it's because it's scary, because it's overwhelming. It's almost like you're trying to, if you open that door, it's almost like you're accepting some kind of responsibility that feels too heavy. That's the way I see it. I'm not saying I'm Mr. Saint or whatever, but look, I enjoy talking with people and personally, and it's okay, and guess what? I don't know, man. American culture at the moment, as we know it, is undergoing the most monumental change and the most monumental upheaval that we've ever experienced, including, this is going to be with this, Corona-19 that we're all dealing with at the moment. This is going to be more disruptive and more changing one way or another than even the Great Depression, let alone the world wars, and for so many other reasons. And it's going to expose, it is exposing so many areas that one, we weren't at all prepared for this. There will be winners and there's going to be a lot of losers.
Yes.
You can only, all we have though is hopefully some kind of humanity, I guess. It's just it's not in the ethos of American culture, unfortunately.
As a culture, we escaped physically, right, from various European countries and others. I mean, that's how America, as we know it, was formed. We're all really immigrants. We're just not consciously realizing it, maybe, but that just happens to be the case. We're a young country.
In a strange way, though, Juliana's not an immigrant, but I am. But I'm American, and she could barely get here.
Yeah, there you go. There's a paradox for you.
I think no bullshit. I think about this because that's what's kind of a little bit about how this American pride, and now some of these people are going to state capitals or hospitals protesting the lockdown and the shutdown. And it's so naive and it's so dangerous and it's just so stupid. Sorry, but this is like, this is a I strongly feel it's a turning point for our culture, and I don't know. I'm not confident so much great may come out of this, but let me put it this way: it's exposing.
It's true. Yes, it's exposing sort of the cracks and the flaws. And interestingly enough, like I said, we escaped physically and we formed this other society, other world. We made our own set of rules, right? And now, as a society, as a modern culture, we escape virtually. I mean, we live in an alternate reality. A lot of our times, just if you break down the day, how much time do you spend, watching television or, on social media and things like that, escaping into somebody else's world and not living your own, right? So how do we relate to each other as a result? How did it change the dynamics as a culture?
Yeah.
And now that it's been exposed, as you correctly pointed out, I mean, the irony of this whole thing to me is that even though we are tasked with the social distancing, i.e. 6 feet between us, we have an opportunity to get closer without being physically next to each other. Just by realizing that we are interdependent and that we are all a lot more human, hopefully most of us, than we realize. So it becomes a choice.
Yeah.
Whereas before, you just say that people weren't consciously aware of it. Now it's a bit in your face because now we don't have as much opportunity, to just live in La La Land. If, we can choose to continue to hide in some other mediums, but we could also choose to say, wait, what does it mean? What does it mean to us as a people, as a nation, even as United States, which a lot of people look up to? How are we going to show up? And what winds up happening, I'm watching great things become greater, courage in a face of tremendous fear become more courageous, and people that are jerks becoming way worse.
Yeah.
It's just like totally amplifies whatever was there. It doesn't change it. It just makes it bolder and brighter. And I think it's healthy to see that because I prefer to kind of, deal with in reality as opposed to the made up, the pseudo reality that a lot of people prefer. And I understand the desire. It's easier. You don't have to hold yourself accountable in that scenario. When you watching some other characters at play, whether you binge watching Netflix or whatever your escapism is, I get it. I think we all need some dosage of it in balance. But when you live your whole life vicariously to someone else, you're not a fully formed human being.
Yeah.
So as a member of society, you're going to behave accordingly. You're incomplete. You didn't do the work.
Yeah.
And that's where that comes from.
Almost like you're looking for a shortcut in a way, what you're saying.
Exactly. So when you lash out to somebody, when you can't be held accountable because you're behind the screen, or you treat somebody who is serving you in some way and making your life better as a second-class citizen, that's on you. Yeah. You're the one that really, if you look at it in all seriousness, you're the one that's at fault here because none of us are any greater than others.
Yeah.
None of us are any greater than another person. And if you believe that, I hope you rethink it.
Well, and I think when it comes to, yeah, sure, going back to, let's say, the mistreatment of other people in society, for whatever reason, when you see, let's say, people who don't treat with respect or much humanity somebody they're hiring to help clean their house or mow their lawn or whatever, or even, I think the extension could even be what you're seeing with people who protesting, the shutdown to COVID. So much is just driven by fear in people, and I think when, the fear is, well, okay, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be a person that has to clean people's toilets, mow people's lawns, or, this whole thing with the virus and the shutdown, that militant reaction is fear-based, meaning not about, well, this is my way of fighting the virus. No, it's this fear of somebody's taking away my control in life. Somebody's taking away something from me, and I have to fight it, and I don't trust it. And it's just fear-driven. And I can understand how people would react to that. It's sort of like an underlying craziness with the human condition for some people,
Absolutely. No.
There's insecurity. There's, of course, there's fear. Then that manifests, in anger, and other thing. There's no answer. This is just who we are as a.
Yes. No, it is humanity. You're 100% correct. I mean, it's going all the way back to the Colosseum when a bunch of spectators were watching somebody get tortured in full view. I mean, how is it not different from the voyeurism we practice now? It's just the arena is different.
We think we're so wonderfully advanced in all this, but
I know.
Actually, I mean, we're no different in a way. We're still the same sort of, DNA and animal, if you will, that, okay, yeah, the Romans who are watching dudes get eaten by tigers in a Colosseum, or even in the, Germany in the 30s, going through the Jewish ghettos and rounding people up. Like, we're not actually, so, I mean, I'm not trying to get so depressed and heavy, but it's not like in those times, people who we are now, there's such evolution, like, oh, that could never happen. Or, that was just a different thing. These people were hateful and horrible and no way. How that could happen tomorrow.
Skip away. That's true. Absolutely. By the way, speaking of antidepressant, there's something in your glass. I need to know. It's pink. I'm gonna demo my bottle too that I just got out of the chiller. It's AXR from Napa Valley.
Ilona, what a wonderful segue. We can go from Colosseum, Rome, and Nazi Germany to
yes, a nice birthday.
a better wine theme. So perfect.
Yes. No, it wine goes with everything. It's not just a pairing with food. Trust me, it pairs with life really well. It's a great therapist. I've talked to more than one bottle. Totally admit it.
And it's the wine can be such a great equalizer in such a good way, where you can share it with any social class, any level of wealth, any kind of person background. Not everybody likes wine and not everybody wants to try it, but it's a shared thing, and it's something that truly it doesn't I don't think wine doesn't see this sounds so silly, but race, color, creed,
No, absolutely. And the thing is, wine is such a unifier.
Yeah.
Because exactly for those reasons that you described, it's not about who the participants are, it's in what they look like. It's the fact that they're at the same table and having a conversation. So the focus is completely shifting from external to, hey, we're all together, which is what people say, but this is a way to practice it. This is a great practical way. Grab a bottle of wine and all of a sudden you have friends.
And wine has such history that this is, wow, I forget what I'm trying to remember the dates, but, in terms of what we know about the history of wine, it goes back thousands and thousands of years. Somehow this idea of some grape juice or whatever, fruit juice, sits there, and there was some weird process that suddenly it made this beverage that yeast got into it, the sugar fermented, it created alcohol, and, thousands and thousands of years ago, that began, this art form that we've now really been enjoying at such a high level for a few hundred years. But wine was something that even in many very early, some of the first human civilizations had wine, which is so cool.
Depending on who you ask, it all began in either Azerbaijan, Armenia, or Georgia. Depending on the country and who you're talking to, that's where it all began. And then, this underground, the amphora and the medicinal stuff, that it was actually sacred wine.
No.
I'm like checking my phone, make sure it's.
No, sorry.
No, it's all good.
For some reason, I wish it would override that, but I'll get you right back here.
No, it's all good.
Okay. I'm back.
Checking to make sure it's in airplane mode. No, I mean, ancient civilizations were pretty crafty and pretty smart.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you think about, the wine in its inception, in the processes that it takes to get to a final product, it's very similar. Just, the methods of production got more sophisticated, but at its origin, it's a plant that basically some varietals are like weeds. Like Chardonnay is a good example. It grows everywhere. And, it's a survivor. If you think about what these poor vines go through in difficult conditions, like, wow. I mean, talk about tenacious. I've seen some root architecture, what's underground. So what's above ground is literally a tip of the iceberg. What's underground is insane. Sometimes it's hundreds of feet.
Oh, yeah.
That's seeking water and nutrition. That's what I mean by survivors. It's kind of cool, actually. And even like during the fires in California, unfortunately, we've been hammered by those. Vines become a natural water break. So they retain water in their root system.
Wow.
So talk about that, right? So I have a lot of respect for that plant. And then, of course, the fermentation and such like that. I think that there's so much mimicking of human experience to the whole wine concept. Even as a finished product, like when it's young, usually, it's a little disjointed, doesn't know what the hell it's doing quite yet. It's just all over the place. Then as it gets older, it gets more into its own, right? It's more interesting, it's more complex, but it's also not quite as youthful and vibrant. And then as it slowly declines, it's very intellectual in many respects. So the pleasure aspect kind of dissolves more. It's not quite the same as when you have this youthful, vibrant, super attractive beverage in your glass. And so it kind of mimics human experience, doesn't it?
It does. And, I was just thinking when James, when the two of you were here and we opened up for his birthday, his 50th birthday, the Bordeaux from 1970, which was great, but that's a much different experience than, let's say, if we had opened up the same chateau, the same wine from, let's say, 10 years ago, 10-year-old, it was fabulous, but it's a different kind of experience, and it is that expression, and that's also the other amazing mystery of wine really is how it can age and it can mature. And like you say, some bottles of wine, some of the certain styles and regions truly have their own life cycle, much like we do as people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what's so fascinating is that cycle has so many facets to it and so many different roads you could go. And some wines literally can last almost a lifetime, certainly an adult lifetime. So it's decades and decades. I mean, 1970 that was showing up. And we had also, thank you, I'm still thinking about that Jordan that we had from 1977. How insane was that? It's almost like a mind bender.
Yeah.
You know, when you think about the sheer number of years that it sat in that bottle.
Yeah, and that happens to be my birth year, so I have a connection to it. And I've had that wine many times, and that was possibly what I can remember the best experience with it. And of course, it's enhanced because you're sharing it with like-minded people and in the right situation. But that is cool, you know. It is like history, you know, and it is a you know, going back to this idea of it being something that can be you know, uniting and leveling in a way. Man, I really think these wines, if you can you can open a great bottle of wine, it's changed so much if you're sharing it with others that can appreciate it also. It's true, you know, somehow the enjoyment and even the expression of a wine is truly changed by the context, you know, in which it's opened and shared. And so that night, James 50th with the Chateau G score 1970, and then we opened up the, you know, Jordan 77. You know, the fact that we could understand it, talk about it, we were sharing this together as something brought us together. It was so cool. Made them better wines in a way, you know. I don't know. There's some mystery there.
There absolutely is. You know, I used to watch a lot of movies. It unfortunately hasn't had time lately, but some of my favorite movies were, you know, food, wine movies, you know, like Water for Chocolate, Tortilla Soup, you know, Babette's Feast. There's not too many of those. But each one of them, you know, really was about that third entity that you just described. When people got together and it changed that moment, the fabric of it, the experience, and all of a sudden they started speaking in tongues and it brought out the best in them. And it was tremendous to watch. I wish there was like a million of them. I would totally eke out time to watch that kind of content. But this happened so many times in your life when you were with a group of people or with, you know, close friends or whomever, even, you know, with your loved one or ones. And all of a sudden, just the transformational part happens. And you can't put your finger on it. No, you can't photograph and put it on Instagram. It's not the same.
No.
But it's happening. And it's just as real as the person sitting next to you in front of you. Yeah. And wine facilitated that. All of a sudden, some part of you came to the forefront, came in focus. And you're connecting on a different level because those parts of your humanity are now communicating.
Yeah.
And it's the coolest thing ever. And I think it's the biggest high I've ever had. And it's not coming from alcohol, it's coming from that interaction.